Hey guys, I'm Brent.
I'm Lila, and you can find us on the web at www.braintrustlive.com.
That's it.
We are deep into the voting law dramas of 2021. I'm assuming
Listen,
2021 will be famous primarily for voting law dramas.
I think so too. We've been talking about it for a while, and go figure that Georgia got around to it first because, I mean, they have a
They had a
long
lot to.
history of this, and they, considering what happened in the 2020 election, they wanted to make sure that that was not going to be happening again in the future,
Had
which
to get
is
back into it.
so hilarious because they spent the entire 2020 election really sticking up for how fair their election
I know.
was, like in the face of all of Donald Trump's sort of like talking about like how terrible they were and how Dominion this and God knows what else, and going after Raffensperger and Brian Kemp himself and like all like elections officials and everything, and like in the face of all of that, Georgia elected officials assured us that they ran the greatest election that has ever been run in the history of elections, which makes needing to pass this bill all the more questionable, which is
Truly.
beyond questionable to begin with.
It's so true. I think part of it is that the person who is most into voter suppression there was very fortunately not the Secretary of State anymore. He was the governor, and I think he was just not paying the kind of attention to how he could, steal the election ahead of time. And then,
Right.
like, I think Brian Kemp
Kemp?
Yeah, Brian Kemp wanted.
Which is weird because Brian Kemp is only the governor because he already stole an election.
I know. Well, that's I feel like, but Brian Kemp wants to. His voter suppression tactics involve him being in a position to suppress votes as opposed to being like the broad mouthpiece of the Georgia government. And he stupidly had somebody overseeing the election who actually did think it was fair. Right. And so he wasn't able to strong arm, his
Right.
own administration into stealing the election. And then afterwards, he couldn't be like, we wanted to steal the election, but he couldn't. Instead, he passed this law in an effort to essentially say we wanted to steal this election, but we couldn't. But we didn't get around to it.
And we will steal future elections.
And we will steal all the future elections. So don't worry, Georgia's back on track.
Right. Exactly.
This has created a really frustrating obligation, I think, for those of us that prefer to spend election day in our own communities, which is that basically like every single human being in America is going to have to book a flight to Georgia and go hand out water illegally to everyone in line just to prove a point. We're going to have to spend our own hard-earned dollars doing that. We're going to have to buy the stupid water with our own hard-earned dollars just to stick it to fucking Brian Kemp. We're going to have to, you probably have to deal with elevated hotel costs in Georgia because so many people are going to be doing this. We're going to potentially have to get arrested in Georgia, which is a pain every time. Getting arrested is like a great show, but it's also like a huge logistical nightmare. And we are only stuck with that obligation because these fools in the Georgia state government decided that they were going to pass like a ludicrous voter protection, election protection law.
And awful.
It imposes new voter ID requirements for absentee ballots, which one of the nice things about absentee ballots in a lot of voter ID states is the ID requirements are less onerous. And frankly, I mean, we've had Kat Calvin on the podcast before. Her organization specifically in Georgia and other states helps people get IDs. It can be incredibly complicated to get IDs. And so this is an indirect voter suppression tactic always.
You have to have an ID to both request an absentee ballot and to return your absentee ballot.
You can't.
You gotta have it on both
they've
ends.
somehow like created like a double ID system.
Right.
When
forcing people to have an ID once wasn't
just one ID
enough.
would suppress the vote. You don't need to go for two. But it allows the state to take over local board of elections so that they can, I guess, impose more horrific laws on in places like Atlanta, where probably the local government is actually interested in having some people vote.
Well, and it can go in and we saw other states sort of attempt to do this. Actually, it can go in and it can basically like tell them not to certify their results, or tell them that their results are wrong, or whatever, because it's those local election boards that are the ones who are actually certifying their elections and then sending them to the state. So if the state is able to do that, they could have gone into any of those counties that ended up being close, that had to like do extra counting because there were so many ballots that were sent by mail in those places. They could just come in and be like, nope, you're done. we're done counting now. Like there's so many different ways that could go south fast.
So if you thought 2020 was fun, just wait until 2021. It also, it continues the not worldwide state, it's not even a statewide, the annoying statewide war on drop boxes, which the weird thing that like Republicans have decided is their ticket to suppressing the vote is just to like take away drop boxes. We saw them do that in Texas in 2020. Like it's a tactic that is specifically designed to make it difficult for people to vote absentee or by mail, but is also like, to have that as like an explicit policy is so bizarre and like uncalled for, and also just like extreme, that it like for some reason that one like really blows my mind when I hear about states trying to limit drop boxes, because it's so overt. It's like, you can have the ballot, but you can't return it. We're not going to figure out how to return it to
Texas,
us.
I think when they did something like you can that you were like allowed like one per county or something, but some of these counties in Texas are like so sprawling because there's parts of Texas that are massive and no humans live in. So like to drop it off within your county, you were still going to have to drive like 2 hours to get to the ballot.
And these are tactics that, by the way, are problems for rural voters who vote Republican, because you're not going to have a hard time. Like, listen, having a drop box in, an annoying part of LA is annoying, but you can get to it. It's not a 6-hour drive across empty country. Like,
right.
There's no way this doesn't indiscriminately sort of like ruin the voting experience, or not indiscriminately, but sort of disproportionately affect the voting experience of people in rural counties who are the very people they're relying on to vote for them. And then I think the one that's gotten the most press, rightfully, is Georgia famously has lines at their ballots in a lot, specifically in precincts where people of color vote.
And everyone always talks about how heroic these people are, as opposed to talking about how,
why they're waiting in line so long.
Gotten around to talking about how terrible it is, but like everybody's like, these people are really just, and they are, obviously. But let's think about maybe like why we don't have to see those lines, as opposed to like talking about how great and wonderful it is to see democracy at work. Right?
Instead, we've decided that when those lines crop up, no one is allowed to hand those voters water. That's our new strategy.
Right, our new strategy
combating the lines is to kill the voters in them.
Die in line, right?
Right. Yeah. So that is why we're all going to have to jump on airplanes and fly into Atlanta, which is not even a fun airport. And it's a car city, so you're going to have to rent a car, which is going to be annoying. And then you're going to have to drive all over Kingdom Come to come bring water to helpless people in line in Georgia polling places, because there's going to be lines because of all of the other ways in which they're limiting people's access to the ballot. And then you're going to have to get arrested for it. That's going to be days off of work that you're going to have to take. And all because Brian Kemp couldn't just take a fucking hint and get lost. Just makes me angry.
This got through both chambers in their state house and signed by him in like a matter of hours on Thursday.
Yeah, they were just like, we got to get in there. One thing that could help mitigate the effects of these kinds of laws is if there was some kind of federal legislation that superseded these laws that prevented these kinds of ridiculous tactics from being legal in the first place.
Yeah.
I don't know where we are on that. I know that there's a couple, there's the For the People Act, there's the John Lewis Act, Voting Rights Act. We're going to have to get rid of the filibuster to pass those. So that's something that we should absolutely do if it means that people in Georgia are no longer going to live in a democracy of even the broadest sort.
Well, and that, this is, again, I feel like these are, we're going to talk about the filibuster. We're talking about the filibuster in a second here because Biden got asked about it in his press conference, which is up next. But, I think, again, and I mentioned this as the tactic last week, now that this has actually been passed, the question to ask Joe Manchin is not, are you in favor of the filibuster? It's, are you in favor of this bill that just got passed in Georgia?
Right. And also another related question should be, are you in favor of being elected again?
Right, exactly. So I think that like as these things start to happen, you're absolutely right. The only way that we pass something at the federal level is if we do away with the filibuster. And the only way that we can do that is if we get all 50 Democrats on. And the way that you convince the ones that seem to be unconvincible right now is by, literally pointing to some of these specific things that are not going to be able to happen on their watch if they don't do it.
Now, messaging wise, I also think that these laws are so overreaching that they're like a terrible strategy for the Republicans anyway, because historically, what happens is that when you try to suppress the vote in really like comically out of proportion ways, people just show up because they're annoyed that you're trying to take away their vote. People don't feel like feeling cheated.
You
My
see it
mom
happen all the
often
time.
says this. She's often like, I don't know why Democrats don't message more about how Republicans are cheating them, because people hate being cheated universally
Yeah.
across the aisle. Everyone hates being cheated. So,
Well, and black voters in Georgia have been feeling this way. Well, I was going to say ever since the election before Brian Kemp, but obviously long before that, because this
Right.
new law is being compared, and rightly so, to, you know, the laws of the Jim Crow era. So
Right.
it's not as if you know, the people who this law is going to disproportionately affect are not used to feeling this way. But I think you're absolutely right. I mean, this is, if anything is going to galvanize, you know, a large voting bloc, it's going to be a bill like this. Now, that's not to
Yeah.
say that like it doesn't make it harder for those people to vote, because
Absolutely.
it does. So many of these things obviously are going to disproportionately, you know, affect you know, people of color, people of you know, lower socioeconomic status,
Yeah.
you know, so obviously it sucks for all of the reasons that it's clear that it sucks. But because of those reasons, I think that
Right. It's
at
just
least
like
to
a
a degree, you're
terrible
right.
and it's right on the heels of those voters that this law is specifically trying to suppress, knowing that they're in the majority for the first time. Like, the one thing that Democrats in Georgia now know is that there's more of them. So a law that's specifically designed to keep them from voting does not eliminate their knowledge that there are more of them. So as much as, you know, it's certainly close, and this could certainly impact Georgia elections. I'm not suggesting that it won't. I am suggesting that I actually think this is sort of a lose-lose proposition. I think it will rob Democrats of representation, which is a thing I'm against. But I think it also just like sort of diminishes further any credibility that Republicans were holding on to in states like Georgia, where, you know, there is still a sizable proportion of people that, you know, identify both historically and culturally with being Republicans, and sort of a proud history of Republicanism. You know, and hating civil rights or whatever they're up to. But like, you know, I think that there is like a culture of pride in being a Republican in a lot, especially in a lot of Southern states, in a lot of other states as well. And I think this is so brazen and ridiculous that it's going to be hard to escape the narrative that it's brazen and ridiculous. And I don't think that does them any favors either. Like, I think it would be smarter to try to convince people that it's better to elect you. I mean, they can't because their ideas are insane right now, but like that would be a strategy I would suggest as a more long-term method of getting the vote back.
Sure.
Would be to give voters, you know, to try to sell yourself to voters. And neither party likes that strategy, and I get it. It's hard. It's complicated. You got to talk to voters to employ that strategy. You know, it's, you get caught, you promise them $2,000 and then you don't deliver, and you got to explain that. I mean, it's complicated, but it just feels like this is like a way to maybe win one election. And everyone, this is what every Democrat, because Democrats love to do this, will say, it's like, all hope is lost. You will never get any chamber back because Republicans are changing the law, as if things can't always change again. As my mother used to say, and we used to often repeat, although she claims she doesn't remember saying this, but whatever, nothing can't be undone. None of these laws are permanent on the books forever.
Right.
So,
well, and also there's already a lawsuit against this specific bill.
Right, there's
So,
already a lawsuit here.
Stands, right?
I
mean,
don't see this law standing because there's no reason for it. And the reason they're claiming they needed it is based on unfounded claims of election fraud that Trump was peddling that everyone knows are lies. So like, whatever with that. But it feels like this kind of thing is something that I think often Democrats face as if they are intractable problems, but they're actually not intractable, because a law like this, first of all, we thought at one time in our lives that we would never win the House again. And then demographics changed. And so even though they had gerrymandered the entire Congress so that it was just Republican districts and like a few packed Democratic districts, we won because people moved. Like that is a thing that can always happen. So there are many ways that a law like this can become less favorable than it was, which is not to say that we shouldn't try to overturn it. But I'm just saying, like, let's not pretend like this is the end of the line. Let's make them not enforce it. Let's make them stop this. Like, let's not allow this.
Yeah,
is my point. We don't have to. We don't have to do anything we don't want to do. We made the whole thing up. We made up elections. We made up money. It's all fake. We can decide how we want to do it. So if you're a Democrat in Georgia, just be like, we're in the majority, so we are also able to be in charge. I don't know.
Right.
I can't
And vote like it.
I'm like so worried
Just
that
make sure you vote.
these are going to keep happening, where like there are going to continue to be laws, like victories with laws like this in states where we're going to see like ridiculous voter ID laws and like,
of them in like 43 different states or something like that. This is a nationwide push right now.
I know what I'm going to start hearing from everybody about how depressed they are about it and how hopeless everything is and how nothing will ever be the same. And like, I just like don't think that we need to decide these are valid. Like, I feel like let's just not agree to that. This is not a valid law. This is a ridiculous law. On the face of it, there's like no reason for it. It uses no real evidence to suggest that it's necessary. It employs tactics that we specifically prevented them from employing for years because they are discriminatory. Like, let's just decide they can't do it. It's done.
Great.
I wash my hands of this.
It would be great, as you said, if we get rid of the filibuster, which was one of the things that Joe Biden got asked about at his first press conference as president, which I think people had been wondering when was actually finally going to happen. So
and what it would be like.
And what it would be like. Yeah.
Right.
I watched most of it. And
I didn't because I can't watch him. I continue to have that problem.
You know, I'm gonna, if you don't mind me skipping ahead, because we have a story coming up about like how a lot of Republicans were sort of like talking about like how he was stumbling and seemed confused at times and various things like that. And I had, look, if you've been listening to the podcast, you know that neither of us have a real love affair with Joe Biden, right? And we are also people who have seen Joe Biden, you know, talk about turning record players on for Black children. We
saw him meander his way through a campaign event in Iowa that ended with an elderly man having to be taken out by an ambulance, and Joe Biden still hadn't gotten to his point. And you know,
I mean, we have seen the Joe Biden of being confused and not making sense, right? And this was not that, right? I mean, there were some moments of awkwardness, like the questioning was.
He's got a temper, that guy. That's what I think I'm realizing about him. He has a temper.
He got defensive sometimes. He asked some of the reporters if they were asking real questions. You know, so like
some of them were, like, by the way,
certainly
asking real questions when he asked that.
I know, but in terms of like whether he sort of like had a handle on like what he was doing, I feel like he definitely did. And look, I don't know what you know, Donald Trump talked about like he was on drugs because he got so much better in the debates after some of those first debates where do you remember this?
And put him on drugs.
Where Donald Trump was like he was on drugs. And like, look, I think maybe he is. I don't know what the fuck they are. It might just be Prevagen, for God's sake.
Or maybe he's on Adderall or something.
Some other pill they're peddling on CNN to old people to help their memory. Who knows? I would like some of it because it's working. But like, I think that like generally like his handle on responding in at least vaguely coherent ways was fine. So if you see a headline about like him not knowing like where he was or being able to remember his own name or whatever, you should discount those because that's not what happened.
The Joe Biden issue is not ever also that he like doesn't know what he's talking about ultimately. Like often I disagree with what he's talking about. Often when he really flubs, he's trying to talk his way around a not very popular point. So when he says weird shit, it's usually because he's trying not to say the thing he actually thinks because he's a politician and that's what politicians do. And his tell is that he says incredibly weird stuff.
Right. He didn't call anybody like a dog pony soldier. He didn't challenge an obese man to a push-up competition. He didn't do any of those things.
No, his one flare of temper was at reporters for asking him questions, which look, maybe don't get upset about that since you're at a press conference, but you know, what are you going to do? But the sort of the things that the conservative media is sort of grabbing onto, I think, are a different genre of Joe Biden speaking tactic, which is that he has weird pauses because he has a stutter. And that is not the problem with his speaking that makes me unable to watch it. It is that he sometimes calls people dog-faced pony soldiers out of the blue and you're like, what has happened? So he didn't have those flubs.
No, he didn't have those flubs. No. He got asked the most questions about the border. There was like a prolonged section of that. And then also
that's where he got mad too.
And then people came back to it. And that is sort of like where he got upset because I think people were, at telling, one reporter told a story about how she met a 10-year-old boy who had, been in confinement for God knows how many days. And, I mean, the horror stories that you hear about these, places where they're, keeping unaccompanied minors at the border. And we know that they're being kept there for too long at this point. And we know all of these things. And he tried to sort of basically write that off as like not being worse than it ever is. Now is the time that we apparently always get surges, because it sort of is like the best weather time to cross. I
Right.
mean, if you're
It's spring.
crossing the entirety of Mexico, like you sort of like can't be doing it, all year round. So
Right.
he sort of made that point, and he was like, it's not, or at least it wasn't any different than years previous to Trump, essentially.
Right.
And then he also sort of attempted to blame Trump for some of Trump's policies being being the things that got us to the point where, we're having to house these people for longer. And he talked about that's why how he was opening some of these other places up, which of course he got some flack for, but it's just because some of these are overcrowded and various things. So he was cagey about when he was going to let reporters into some of these places. I think they had opened up one center on the border, but there's obviously more than that, and he was cagey about that. And I think he said it's like it was going to be like after they got some of their policies put in place or something like that. Like he didn't want to let anybody in there now, essentially.
They must be in terrible shambles.
I would assume
right
so.
now.
Yes.
The end. I think also like I think people forget that like even if you don't see this as his fault and you don't believe that his policies are, like even if you don't see any of this, and like some of it is the fault of an administration he was also a part of. So, some
For
of these,
sure.
so it's not that I'm suggesting that I don't maybe think some of this is his fault, but I'm saying even if you think it's unfair to harangue him about this because Trump was insane and he was just the president or whatever, this is part of the process of pushing him to actually do something that is not terrible. So like, you don't have to feel bad that he's getting pushed about this, even if you don't think it's his fault, because this is part of the process. I think a lot of the times people aren't really that process oriented when it comes to politics. They think about what is and is not fair in the moment to harangue somebody about. And like, it's actually fair to complain about literally anything that's going on to anyone who is currently in power, because even if they weren't the ones who caused it, they're the ones empowered to do something about it.
They're the only ones who can fix it.
His ability to prioritize this relies on us telling him it's a priority. So so don't feel bad. I saw some like responses to this that I was like, everybody calm down. Like, we don't have to believe this is his fault to believe it's now his responsibility. And also us telling him that this is a priority for us, that the humane treatment of migrants is a priority to the American people, is what makes him know that it's a priority to us. And then he can think to himself, should I do something about that since it's a priority to my constituents, the American people? And then we can fix it, Politics.
Yep.
In any case, the thing that made the most press was him saying that he was planning to run in 2024.
Yes.
That was, listen, say nothing, first of all. Second of all, not the most important takeaway from this press conference. But third of all, concerning.
Right.
Feinstein-y concerning.
They also asked if he assumed that Kamala would be on the ticket with him, and he said yes. But like, I think he's in the process of actively ruining her political career right now, because this made me think of like all of the times when we have talked about like various companies who are about to like completely go under or whatever,
and you hire a woman to be the CEO.
They hire a woman as the CEO to basically like allow them to like shepherd it into like tanking, essentially. Right? Like, didn't VW do that like after
or like GM did that,
or GM or somebody like that, like, and it's a classic play, basically. You're like, let this woman deal
they
with
suddenly
this
care about diversity
here.
When everything's about to fall apart and they have nothing to lose and they need a PR move that makes sense.
Right, because like the problem is like it's not that I distrust her to like have good ideas about what to do down there, but I mean, like, we've been trying to do something about immigration for administration after administration after administration, and we just don't. And obviously this is one of the biggest hot button issues that there is right now, to sort of like allow her to like take the lead on it. And again, it's not that I don't think that she's perfectly capable of it, it's just that I don't think that like any living human is capable of making it out alive from having dealt with
it's like assigning her to like create peace in the Middle East. Like, okay, sure, that's a
Except that there would be probably less political fallout
yeah,
from
that's true because
it
it would
if,
be an
you
issue
know,
that
I
no
mean,
one in
like,
the
I think
states
this is
actually cares about
worse
meaningfully.
almost. Like,
Yeah,
right. Nobody expects you to do anything about
right. To
that,
solve
right?
peace in the
And
Middle East,
also just
that's
like the
a trope.
vitriol that she's gonna have to talk about, like, allowing unaccompanied minors into the country and like just talk about, I mean, it's just like all of these issues are that she will be right about are just issues that like specifically can wreak havoc on your political
Yeah,
career, and
and also
that's a
one thing
bummer
that I
for
think
her.
is unfair about this is that the whole benefit of having someone like Biden, if he were to take advantage of the benefits that he offers, is he's at the end of his career, so he can take some swings. Kamala is not. So to give her an intractable problem that just creates a political problem for her is really fucking annoying. Whereas Biden could actually say some unpopular things about the border crisis and get away with it because, like, who cares? He's at the end of
Yeah,
the line now.
right. You're almost dead.
Right. It's like you're Feinsteining around. If you run in 2024, you will have gone full Feinstein, and I will be mad about it. But like at the end of the day, this is your last job. So like go big or go home. Whereas Kamala like has to have a job after this. At most 8 years, 7 to 8 years from now, she's got to find employment again. Like
Right.
she's not going to go back to being a senator. Like
No.
what's she gonna do if she gets character assassinated by loonies who
Yeah.
are trying to ruin her from both sides, likely,
Yeah.
because she was tasked with the world's biggest political dynamite.
Yep. Oof. Yeah. Bleak.
On the bright side, we might be having a real infrastructure week soon.
Right. Like that involves an infrastructure plan.
I mean, can you imagine if infrastructure week was used to develop and finance an infrastructure plan?
No.
It would be worrying because
Again.
then it might be the last infrastructure week, and that's one of the better weeks because those are always so celebratory.
I know. It's interesting that this is what they're choosing to do next. I mean, we don't know much about it. I think a vague price tag has been floated of like $3 trillion or something like that, but we don't really know much about it. I mean, he talked a lot during the campaign. He's been using the phrase "build back better" again.
I
In
was
the
going to
last
say,
sort of,
he
like,
said he
week
was going
as
to
he
build
talked
back
about
better.
this. Yeah. So like, it's probably going to be, some package of things that we have heard from him already here. So it'll be interesting though to see how this shakes out. That price tag, while obviously does not scare me because I don't
Because money's not
care
real.
about how much money something costs in any way, shape, or form, is obviously, I think, going to be alarming to some folks, even Democrats who are stupid. I've already heard Angus King, who I guess is technically an independent, but like going around talking about like what the pay fors are going to be for this.
Okay.
So
the pay fors for a $3 trillion piece of
trillion
legislation. Good luck,
I know.
Angus King.
So it'll be interesting here. I think on some level it's smart because this is a thing that Republicans have been claiming for multiple administrations, even during the Obama administration, and that Democrats claimed during the Trump administration, that this is something that like would be an easy bipartisan win on. So I think that's a good reason to do it because if you can do it in a bipartisan way, then like great, that'll get some people off of your backs for sort of having pushed the COVID bill through, which again doesn't bother me one bit. But like, I think some of the people who are like, you came here and said you were going to do this, like this is a good sort of olive branch to them. And then also like related to that, I don't see, even if there are pay-fors, a Republican voting for something that's going to cost $3 trillion. So like on the other hand, I think that it gives you, another feather in your cap for getting rid of the filibuster, right? Because it's like, here's a thing that these guys have been saying for 30 years that they would work with us on, and we let them try, and they wouldn't even so much as come to the table. So fuck them.
And the benefit of an infrastructure plan is that it brings tangible improvements to people's surroundings and lives. Right. So it's not like a vague tax giveaway to wealthy people. It's a jobs program. I think he can incorporate some of the green job stuff that the environmental brigade, the environmental brigade, that's everyone, but like that environmentalists are looking for, that the Green New Deal, is sort of related, is promoting. He can incorporate some of that kind of legislative policy as well. It's like, a good way to make a tangible improvement to everyone's life in a way that gives you something to point to later to be like, remember when Democrats were in charge and, you know, your road got paved? It's like it's the reason that elected officials only pave your road on election years. So
Right.
for 4 winters, your road is just like a pothole nightmare of dirt and branches. And then
Yeah.
every 4 years, some truck comes through and repaves it. It lasts for 1 year and it's on election. You know, it's like right before election day. Like there's a reason that infrastructure works in local elections. It also works in national elections. People
Totally.
like infrastructure. And when you see some of the issues that result from not investing in infrastructure start to actually come to a head, like that blackout in Texas, it gives you an
Yep.
opening. Because a lot of the time, the reason, you know, you have to invest preemptively in infrastructure. It's not something that you can necessarily, like if you invest in the power grid, that's not like, people don't see that work in the same way that they do if you like pave their road or whatever. Road paving is local, so I don't know why I'm referencing that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But if you see that the power grid has come to a crashing halt in multiple weather, you know, crises in the last few years, because the same thing obviously happened in Puerto Rico, then I think you have an opening to do that. And that does make a tangible improvement to people's lives because there are going to be all these extreme weather events. And it also is something you can only accomplish messaging wise if you can say that you're preventing something tangible that people saw. So
Yeah.
I think it's good timing in that sense as well.
Yeah, I do too. So he did get asked about the filibuster. There was a great question. Somebody asked him whether he agreed with Obama's statement that the filibuster, you know, was like a relic of, I think,
the Jim Crow era.
Jim Crow era, right?
That's why the progressives have been calling it the Jim Crow filibuster, which is my favorite thing that they've started doing.
Right. And so he agreed to that. He agreed with Obama.
He agreed that it's a Jim Crow.
Because you can't disagree with Obama, by the way.
Well, though, what do we know about the filibuster other than that it was used to try to torpedo civil rights legislation? I mean, what else has it accomplished? And it didn't even accomplish that. The silent filibuster has accomplished making absolutely nothing happen in the Senate. But the spoken filibuster, the performative, dramatic, theatrical filibuster that we all know and love, was mostly just used to try to torpedo civil rights legislation by Democrats in some cases.
Well, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So it's not great.
Democrats, yeah. And so, but he did, for the first time, he still is in favor of just pushing forward to the talking filibuster, where he actually sort of made a funny self-deprecating joke where he said he wanted to go back to how the filibuster was when he got to the Senate 120 years ago, which was good. But then he sort of continued to get pressed on it, and he got asked specifically about this bill in Georgia also, and he did talk about like how terrible it was. He brought up the, you know, handing out water to people in line and how awful that was and everything. And so he did sort of, and who knows whether he did it on purpose, you know, it's Joe Biden after all.
Right.
But he did say that there may come a time where we would have to go beyond was the term that he used of the talking filibuster. And people, I think, latched on to, and that's again why I think like, you know, maybe doing infrastructure is smart, and maybe bringing up some of these things like, you know, I think Schumer has talked about bringing up gun legislature, which we know, you know, 90% of the country agrees with. So like, I think, you know, he's going about a lot of these things, at least I think, fairly intelligently. Yeah. And this is really sort of like what he sold people on, at least to a degree, besides being able to work in a bipartisan way, which he hasn't really done yet, which is not his fault.
Well, no one can do. It was like promising people you find fairies and they're.
But it was just sort of like knowing how to push the buttons of the federal government in ways that would like get him things that he wanted. And obviously he's only been in office for 60 days, I think, at this point, or something like that. So I think the verdict is still out on that. But I do think that the fact that he already got this giant COVID bill through, which, you know, we've talked about on the podcast, we don't agree with everything that was in there, but like the fact that got through, and we have now moved on to other sort of like big things that they are intending to do, I think is a sign that there's at least like some level of him, you know, actually knowing what he's doing.
Trying to do stuff.
Trying to do stuff. So, you know, again, it's early. We'll see how it goes. But
well, it'd be nice if someone tried anything.
It would be nice if someone tried.
After so long of people, Trump talked a big game, but he honestly tried very little, which is why everything fell to shit. So
Right.
it would just be nice if people were out there trying some stuff, just any stuff, just the
Yeah.
usual stuff.
Yeah.
He also at this press conference announced the new vaccine goal, because obviously he had said they would get 100 million doses into 100 million arms in his first 100 days. And then that seemed to be going super well because they accomplished it in 60
Well,
days.
when he said it, they were doing 900,000 a day.
Right. So it was like, it's going to take only mere days to double that number, which is why he's now doubled the number as if it's going to be an incredible accomplishment, but is actually
Right,
just going to be exactly what we'll do.
I'm like, look, this is what you do. I get it. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, he said when he made that 100 million vaccines goal, when he set that, he was like, people thought we were crazy. It's like, well, no, actually, no one thought you were crazy. But like,
Right.
you know, it's all the messaging of this, basically. Yeah. But like,
and we have often said that this is what Democrats should do. They should better message what they're accomplishing, even if it's not real things. Yeah.
Right. I just want to have a talk with the administration about what the word goal means. I guess, like, I feel like if you were looking at a spreadsheet and you can see that at day 93 you are going to
definitely
hit 200 million vaccines, then saying your goal is to hit 2 million vaccines is not a goal.
Brent, it's smart messaging. It's not a goal at all. That's it. You only can promise things you can. Listen, remember what happened with the $2,000? You should only promise things you can over deliver on.
Right. Fair.
Especially, yes. I will say that one thing that I have felt a little pride in is that the US is doing a much better job of vaccinating than a lot of countries that were real snarky to us in the last year about how shitty we were doing at everything else. I mean, Canada is doing a terrible job vaccinating people. Mm-hmm. A lot of European countries have not gotten their shit together at all.
France is about to go back into like a full, like fourth or fifth lockdown for like potentially the next month because like they're nearing capacity in their ICUs.
Right.
I mean,
and like, listen, should we maybe do that too, since we are also experiencing a huge surge? Yeah, maybe. That would be smart.
Right. We're opening up, which is
stupid.
Not the way to go, but
we are doing a much better job of vaccinating than a lot of those countries. And that is at least something we did. And actually, I think it's interesting because, you know, I'm in general in favor of socializing these kinds of systems to the largest extent possible. But I think it is actually Canada's lack of alternative methods of getting to people that is preventing them from doing this as quickly as we are. So like we can't get normal healthcare to people because no one can afford it and no one can go in. But for something like this, because we're giving it to like people that have an incentive to advertise to people, we are actually getting through the vaccine. Like giving your vaccines to CVS to give out is great because CVS has an incentive to advertise that they have the vaccines, and that creates demand because they want people to come into CVS and buy random CVS products. And so there's actually like a sort of sales incentive that doesn't exist in a socialized system, which is, I read something about that, about how that might be why some of, you know, the US is accomplishing this a lot more quickly, and why also a lot of states that are hugely suspect states were able to accomplish it so quickly because they were really relying on private distribution networks. Now, that's not an equitable way to distribute it. So it's not, I'm not suggesting there are not flaws with this system. But I am suggesting that in terms of speed, it is an advantage to have such a Wild West system that there's, you know, an incentive for people to go hog wild trying to get vaccines into your arm in competition with each other.
Totally.
Because we're trying to do it so fast. And
and we're trying to do it fast. And the fact that we're trying
and we don't have limited capacity because everyone can give it.
Right, exactly. But we aren't doing a good job, at least here in California anyway, and
doing it
in Los Angeles specifically, doing it equitably.
No.
And it's not for lack
we don't do things equitably.
Right, and it's not for lack of having vaccine in those places. It's like that we have not messaged and done all of and those are the harder things to do, right? Like actually convincing people that they should get it and telling them why and making sure that it's clear to them and things like that. Those things we're not.
Well, and I also think
at right now, but like Los Angeles is saving like 40% of our vaccine allotment, like just specifically for those communities, and they're not getting used, which is not the people in the community's fault.
No, someone has to tell them a lot of them probably don't even know it's available. I mean, that's what's happening in New York. It's like there are these facilities all over the city that they're even walking clinics now, but like no one knows they're there. So like if a tree falls. Also, I will say that I think that countries like Canada that have socialized healthcare systems will find that the percentage of their population that ultimately gets the vaccine will be much higher
Will
than
be
here. And
higher.
it will be because they have socialized healthcare. So
100%.
there's going to be a second version of this problem where like we might have gotten it into everyone's arms faster, but we're never going to get to the vaccine rates that they're going to get to. And that is because of the Wild Westness of our system.
Yeah.
And also because they're going to be able to mandate that people get it in ways that, like, I know I've heard a lot of people say, I don't want to get it, but I'll get it if it's mandatory. And like,
Yeah.
then we have to make it mandatory, obviously, but we'll
Yeah.
never get around to that. Whereas in Canada, they'll be able to be like, it's mandatory. If you want to come to school, you have to have it. And then
Yeah.
people will, you know, whatever, if you want to get on an airplane, if you want to do whatever Canadians do, if you want to go skiing, then you have to have it. And then that will, you know, force up. And they're even, I think in Alaska, there's some talk about them giving it to people who are unvaccinated if they try to go on vacation, giving them Johnson & Johnson on the way into the state.
Oh my gosh, that was funny.
Because Alaska's actually done a really good job. They're one of the most highly vaccinated states so far. They've been going a lot quicker than everyone else, which is funny because they don't live near each other. So I don't know how they're all finding each other to vaccinate. But I would love it if they just started giving people Johnson & Johnson on the way in, just to be on the safe side.
Amazing.
Just to be safe.
Yeah. I was reading something about Johnson & Johnson the other day because at the White House, I think, is a little disappointed with the amount of Johnson & Johnson that has gone into arms. But the reason is because like that is the one that so many places are saving to like try and figure out how to get to harder to reach communities, like, you know, people who like may not be leaving their homes or things like that, because like you only have to give one dose of it. So like because of that, places are just sort of like essentially hoarding it.
And also the vaccine hesitancy is better addressed with a 1-shot thing than a 2-shot thing.
For sure.
You know, like people who are already hesitant, don't make them come back in 3 weeks to get a second shot. And they have 3 weeks to hear about how terrible the side effects from the second shot are. And so they're all
and how it's worse with the second one, right?
And how it's much worse with the second one. Like that is already causing mayhem in New York. So I feel like get those people the 1-shot deal, you know? Get them in there. You guys, we've been having for the last few years, like some exciting labor years. And this year is shaping up to be yet another exciting labor year because there is an Amazon warehouse in Bessemer, Alabama, that is holding a union vote for their 6,000 employees tomorrow, Monday, the day you're listening to this likely, which listen, Amazon's sneaky and awful. It may not happen. It may get held up for a variety of dumb reasons. It would be a really incredible roadmap, though, because Amazon is the sort of Goliath, intractable company. It's the most powerful, richest man in the world who is holding the purse strings here. To force a union vote at an Amazon facility is a big fucking deal, and it could be a really important precedent to set so that other Amazon warehouses and also just other big box chains, other warehouses, other internet companies, whatever it is, have like a roadmap forward about how to organize a union vote. So this is very exciting. And it's so exciting that Amazon is obviously relying on all of the terrible, aggressive anti-union tactics that all companies rely on. But I will note, nothing original. Like they haven't come up with like a secret genius strategy aside from some Twitter remarks that we'll talk about in a second. But like essentially, you know, Walmart sort of created this paradigm of the big box everything store trying to defeat union efforts. They did it successfully. And for years, everyone's just been following their lead, essentially. That anti-union movement at Walmart created essentially like an industry of union busters. And so Amazon is relying on the same tactics because it was successful in Walmart's case. And there are professional union busters that they can call on, largely thanks to the Walmart situation. So, you know, they're lying to everyone about what the union can promise them. They're distributing vote no things and texting people and hiring firms to like run anti-union meetings to tell everyone how terrible unions are. They're, you know, trying to, I think, steal people's union ballots in some secret box or something. You know, they're up to shenanigans. They're being aggressive. Apparently, in 41.5% of union election campaigns, employers are charged with violating federal law because obviously your employer is not allowed to stop you from unionizing.
They're not.
It is actually worth it for employers to pay that fine because they are.
Well, it's better for them to have to pay the fine than
they're so exploitive that they actually have to, you know, that it actually is, you know, problematic. It's expensive for them when their employees unionize, but that's why you should do it.
Yeah.
So in any case, already the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, which is the union that they're in talks with has had more than 1,000 people reach out about unionizing their own workplaces. Like, this is why you try. You try because, and also you try because a lot of these jobs actually used to be good union jobs. Like, I think, people our age don't know this. I was talking to my uncle because my uncle, when he was in his 20s or whatever, worked in a grocery store. And he was talking about what it was like to work in a grocery store when there were unions. And he was like, it was a great job. It was the kind of job that you could buy a house and like live on. Like, he didn't ultimately stay in that industry, but he could have. They had vacations. They would strike sometimes, and you just had to, deal with it. Like, it was like a stable job that, it's a job that provides an essential service to your community, as we've learned during COVID.
Well, and
it used to be it used to be a union job that was protected and that was a good job, and it's not anymore. And there is no reason, if they could make money in, the 60s running grocery stores as union shops, then they could do it now too. Like, there's no reason.
Yeah. And I think one of the points that you just hit on in that sentence there, I think, is one of the reasons why I feel like this feels so pertinent to our times right now, besides the fact that it is, in our opinion, always a good idea to try and unionize, right?
You should always try it.
These are obviously workers who have fucking been through it in the last 13 months, right?
Exactly.
And probably worked more in that amount of time, just because, who's been every single living creature in the United States has been buying something daily from Amazon over the last year, right? So like, these people have been, have been on the front lines of trying to, and so I think they feel like they deserve something. Probably even, every worker feels as though they, deserve to be paid for their time. But I think probably
every worker does.
Even more so with these workers probably than whoever was trying to unionize when they were trying to do it at Walmart stores, right? I just feel like there has to be a feeling amongst those people that like they are being mistreated, and probably even some people who don't even agree with unions, that are probably there, because it's in Alabama after all. Like, some of these people have probably voted for legislators who have tried to make Alabama a right to work state, so
but they also,
I don't know, it feels different to me.
This era also showed them that they're powerful in the sense that they're an important part of the functioning of the economy. So they should not feel like, oh, we're just lucky to have a job. That's how companies make you feel so that you won't unionize. If you work at Amazon right now, or a grocery store, or any other essential service, you are not just lucky to have a job. You're providing us with a benefit. We owe you. It's not, it's not that you are just lucky to make $15 an hour and not be able to pee at some shit factory where your whereabouts are monitored for every millisecond. That you are the ones who provide us with the service. We can't function without you. So like, you deserve to be paid for that. I also feel like, so this is a crisis moment. I think that's one of the reasons that we're seeing some momentum, because like, Alabama is not where I thought this started. But I also want to point out that I feel like, one of the moments that created an opportunity for this pre-pandemic was those teacher strikes from a few years ago. Totally. I think we can thank teachers unions, because if, these same people who are always trying to union bust for everyone, we're trying to criticize teachers for trying to stand up for their own pay. We can thank a bunch of, young women basically for creating this opportunity as well, because unions were getting a bad rap before that because they looked like they weren't effective, because they weren't being very effective. And that was the first moment in recent times that we were able to look at a widespread union movement, not one, there are individual powerful unions in places. That's not, this whole time there have been individual powerful unions, but we were able to look at a broad coalition of unions and see that they could, stand up for various groups of people in various states, just inspired by the idea that they could, basically. So I think that was also like a huge turning point in this conversation. And I think the fact that we're now seeing that sentiment spread to a lot of the places that I think, like with teachers, were abused during this crisis, and if, deserve not just fair pay, but exceptional pay more than anyone.
Yeah.
is a sign that this I think the momentum around this has to continue to build, because we just elevated all of the we created all this rhetoric that elevated all these professions to being heroic, but we didn't compensate any of these people for
Yeah.
the
I know.
time,
I know.
and their treatment didn't change, and we still
I know.
nickeled and dimed them. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. Totally.
Bernie Sanders is down there getting into their business, so that's good.
Yeah, and look, that's not surprising because this is in his wheelhouse here. But like,
Well,
I
he's the
think
one
it's
who got
important.
them $15 an hour in the first place.
Well, right, and it's important that he goes there, and I would implore all Democrats to go
Yeah.
down there, because I think, well, it's important that it's in it's in Alabama, where you mentioned this isn't where you thought it would be, but I think
Yeah.
that there's a perception that isn't crazy to me, that the Democrats have stopped being the party of the working people.
That's right.
Right. And I'm not saying that the Republicans have become the party of the working people,
Right.
but I think probably a lot of these people in this
Working people have no party
probably voted for Donald Trump, if I had to guess. So, and I'm not saying all 6,000 of these people are going to come out and see Bernie Sanders and then decide that they're socialists. But I do think that, like, there is, besides the fact that, like, he just deeply believes this himself, but just in terms of, like, what's a good look for Democrats?
Right.
A good look for Democrats would be to be down there in the next 24 hours.
Yeah, to
Because
be
I think
helping take on the most powerful man on earth.
Right.
Also, because these 6,000 people in Bessemer, Alabama, have a much better shot of getting this union vote to actually pass if there is enough media pressure from the other side that they can get the information to the people who are voting that the union won't ruin their lives and that the union is a good idea. Like, part of this is a messaging battle, and someone like Sanders going there raises the profile of the messaging. There were plenty of Amazon workers that were fighting for $15 an hour before Bernie Sanders got involved in that conversation. But it was him being able to elevate that into a national discussion that helped push them over the finish line. You have to kind of work in coalition with the people that are organizing on the ground, who are helping get to people personally, to make it so that this is a national story, and these talking points about why the union is so important become national talking points, because that helps reach the people that were not going to be reached by just, someone approaching them in the lunchroom or whatever. Like that, I guess you don't really approach people in the lunchroom because you can't eat lunch at Amazon.
Right.
If you're peeing in bottles, you're not having a casual lunch hanging out with your friends.
No, you are not.
But in any case, I think this, especially in the case of Amazon, where we routinely hear stories about some of the conditions where people are literally peeing in bottles and things like that. I think it's important that some national figure come out and say, life doesn't have to be that way.
Right. Joe Biden sort of released that video like a month or so ago, when this was sort of like heating up initially. And I think a lot of people gave him credit for, wading into it. I guess maybe because of sitting president, this probably was like a long way for him to sort of like go to even release that. I would have wanted him to go further, but like, I get it. But I do think that like, this is an important time for us to really be a voice to these people. So I'm glad that he's down there. And I think others have gone down too. I think AOC was down there. I think, but like, it shouldn't just be the far left that is going down, and also to be, like, caring about workers in Alabama.
Joe Biden's supposed to be a union guy. There's a whole centrist sort of working Joe's genre Democrat out there who supposedly the one calling card they have is being pro-union. I mean, when we went to that Joe Biden event in Iowa, there was a huge union presence there, but he's always interested in just the institutional unions. He's not interested in union activism, and you have to have union activism to have an institutional union.
Yeah.
Like, ultimately, there is no union without union activism. So, you can't have it both ways. You can't just be like, we love the firefighters unions, but we like don't care if Amazon workers are getting a fair wage. Right. Because that would be hard, because we might have to, our good friend Jeff Bezos, who owns all of us, might be involved in, also another thing that Bernie Sanders pointed out while he was down in Alabama that I have been trying to say to people just generally so that this becomes a talking point, but I don't have enough reach, is Amazon workers are unionized in Europe. So yes, they can afford it. It's crazy to think that Amazon cannot afford to have their workers unionized. They can because everywhere else in the world, those workers are unionized. You do not hear about French Amazon workers peeing in bottles.
Oh, they would never stand for that.
They would not stand for that there. Why would we? Yeah, a bunch of French men just loitering in a room together, peeing in bottles. I mean,
that's not happening.
That is not a realistic thing that is happening in Amazon France. So we don't have to put up with that. And if our prime costs go up $10, then just fucking suck it up, because that is
also
life in the fast lane. Also, it doesn't have to. No, but also it doesn't have to. They don't pay any taxes. Like, they make billions of dollars. Like, they can afford this without raising our costs even.
Yeah, they can. By the way, it should be mentioned that Bernie Sanders is down there with Danny Glover and Killer Mike. And if you ever need to be like uplifted in your life, then just like dig into the Bernie Sanders Killer Mike lifelong friendship.
I know.
Right?
It's like too amazing.
It's essentially like watching those like dodo videos of like, a dog and a goose being best friends, essentially. Like nothing gives me more joy than seeing those two bobbing around to, places like this and talking about living wages. I mean, that really warms the heart.
It's so true. Meanwhile, Amazon's PR strategy has been really bizarre in the wake of all of this. So basically, it seems like their plan is just to like pick weird Twitter fights with random members of Congress and then like hope that brings them the credibility they require. It started with, so their SVP of Worldwide Operations, this guy Dave Clark, under his own account, released I'm not going to call it a tweet storm, it was 3 tweets, but a series of tweets criticizing Sanders because of this union campaign. She said, "I welcome Senator Sanders to Birmingham and appreciate his push for a progressive workplace. I often say that we are the Bernie Sanders of employers, but that's not quite right, because we actually deliver a progressive workplace for our constituents. A $15 an hour minimum wage, healthcare from day one, career progression, and a safe and inclusive work environment." A lot of caveats, by the way, to that. So if you want to hear about $15 an hour in healthcare, Senator Sanders will be speaking downtown. But if you would like to make at least $15 an hour and have good healthcare, Amazon is hiring. I would like to point out they only started paying $15 an hour because Bernie Sanders brought national attention to the $15 an hour movement that was aimed at them. So that's just one caveat to what is a long caveatful rant that I could go on. But in any case, so then in response to that, Mark Pocan tweeted, "Paying workers $15 an hour doesn't make you a, quote, progressive workplace when you union bust and make workers urinate in water bottles." So the Amazon company PR's response to that was to take the account Amazon News, which is an account where they tell you about what's going on at Amazon, and respond to Mark Pocan by saying, "You don't really believe the peeing in bottles thing, do you? If that were true, nobody would work for us. The truth is we have over 1 million incredible employees around the world who are proud of what they do and have great wages and healthcare from day one." Now, that was dumb because there's tons of evidence of workers in multiple facilities all over the country peeing in bottles. That's a well-documented phenomenon. So that's a bald-faced lie.
And also, people would still work there even if they have to pee in bottles.
Because there's no fucking
people
jobs.
need fucking jobs right now. So like, fuck you for just implying that like people would quit if they had to pee in a bottle. Because like, I mean,
because of all the great alternative jobs available out there, when you literally say you're one of the nation's largest employers, and you, because of that, set the stage for other employers to behave in the way that you behave. And don't tell me that Amazon's healthcare is fantastic. I have dug into that and found that to be a lacking claim as well. In any case, then Amazon News continued their bizarre PR strategy by picking a petty fight with Liz Warren after that, where she tweeted critiquing their stupid, non-tax-paying bullshit behavior, and they responded on Thursday to her, "You make the tax laws, Senator Warren. We just follow them. If you don't like the laws you've created, by all means, change them. Here are the facts. Amazon has paid billions of dollars in corporate taxes over the past few years alone, loopholes and tax havens to pay close to nothing in taxes." So she replied, "I didn't write the loopholes you exploit, Amazon. Your armies of lawyers and lobbyists did. But you bet I'll fight to make you pay your fair share, and fight your union busting, and fight to break up big tech so you're not powerful enough to heckle senators with snotty tweets." And so they replied, I'm sorry, I'm just reading the whole exchange. It's too funny. "This is extraordinary and revealing. one of the most powerful politicians in the United States just said she's going to break up an American company so they can't criticize her anymore. What strategy is this? What is happening? It's like did they hire somebody from like Breitbart to like write their tweets? Like, what's going on?
It's so weird.
It doesn't, I mean, just everything about this. And by the way, every news source on the planet immediately verified that the peeing in water bottles thing. Like the Times, the Washington Post, like it was not just like really like silly internet news sources and Twitter that was verifying that. Like major newspapers also verified that. But also like, is sassing random senators and Congress people like really Amazon's plan here?
Yep.
And this is such a juvenile fight too, because it's like, and I know you are, but what am I fight? It's not even like a sophisticated
not
tactic.
Substantive in any way.
No, it's like, you write the laws. No, you write the laws. No, you write the laws. Like, what are we doing here?
Oh, wild.
In any case, that was only the second craziest thing that happened this week, because the first craziest thing was this boat blocking the Suez Canal. You guys. Listen. It turns out that for all the technology that we carry around in our pockets every single day, one thing that we still rely on the moon and the tides for is getting our toilet paper to anywhere in the Mediterranean, because this huge boat got lodged in the Suez Canal and is blocking the whole canal. It's kind of a problem because places like Syria are literally like starting to ration supplies, because the Suez Canal is how like a large part of the Mediterranean gets all their
hundreds and hundreds supplies. And hundreds of boats backed up.
Yes. So there's something like 327 boats currently backed up because this boat for like 5 days has been blocking the Suez Canal. They've been trying to like dredge it up. They've been like trying to like dredge up the entire Suez Canal. There's a problem because it's lodged horizontally, and boats are not made so that the middle will bear all the weight and the sides will hold it up. And so they're worried the boat is going to crack, and then they're going to have that situation to deal with. They're literally just like hoping that, because there's a full moon tonight, so that, and a rising tide, and then the spring tide is coming on Monday, so they're hoping the water level will rise.
They need like some sort of like Suez Canal like mythology,
like waiting for the blood moon,
it was foretold
Saturn to return
in the olden times that on the third Thursday with Mercury in retrograde that the water would be high enough to. It's like, how is that the plan? They already dug like 18 meters down, like where the boat was, and didn't even do it.
Have you seen the images of these little tugboats trying to like pull this huge boat? They have like 13 tugboats involved. It's like comical how big this boat is and how little these tugboats are.
Also, it is the thing that I love the most about the story, besides the fact that it's just crazy, and is that TikTok has latched onto it like so wholeheartedly.
TikTok is
because it's like
very
such
involved.
A weird thing to like, and every once in a while this happens on TikTok where you're like, how did this turn into the thing? Right? Like, but this is really it. This is where it's at. This is the meme of the moment right now. This boat.
Yeah, and you can get like minute by minute updates from TikTok about what's happening here.
Right. Minute to minute updates. And also like it has turned into like a big metaphor for life somehow. Right. I don't I mean, it's just
you do wonder like
really
why
feeling this.
Why did we invent iPhones before figuring out how to get a large ship out of the Suez Canal? Like, it feels like the technology could have been better spent not haranguing me with 100 texts a day, but with getting ships carrying cargo that's necessary to the survival of whole nations out of mud banks in the Suez Canal.
By the way, I want to talk about how much I deeply enjoy your continued use of the word haranguing throughout this podcast.
Oh yeah, I've been into haranguing today. I don't know, it just feels like it's raining.
No, I like it.
I
am here for
I'm
it.
pro
I feel
haranguing
like you really
people.
Brought us back full circle here.
Yeah.
Story.
I'm pro haranguing iPhone people. It's like I'm just pro most of the haranguing that's going on out there. But it's just, so some ships have decided not to wait for this ship to unload itself. So now the problem is the Suez Canal, much like the Panama Canal, is like a tiny ditch that got dug between two huge land masses, because the only other way around is like an enormous trip through like dangerous waters and pirates around. They have to go like all the way around Africa if they want to get into the Mediterranean another way. And so some ships have done it, but it costs more than $26,000 a day in fuel costs to go around what is it, Cape Horn or whatever it is, the
Yeah.
bottom of Africa, like it costs thousands of dollars a day to change the route, and it's a dangerous route. It's not what you're looking for. But there's also a chance, I learned this on TikTok, that there might be like a major humanitarian crisis in this buildup, because a lot of these ships did not think they were going to be stuck for days on end waiting for a
Oh,
giant boat to
sure, of
unlodge itself. Like they
course.
did not bring an extra 25 days worth of food in case a boat got stuck in the Suez Canal. So
Right,
these
of
are all ships
course.
with crews that had schedules and were expecting to make it to port at some time,
Oh
and
my
are no
word.
longer going to make it to port anywhere because there's nowhere to port. So that's not great either. But
Oh
this
man.
is this is such a big crisis to be caused by such a sort of old-timey problem.
Yeah.
Like a boat is just stuck, and like global trade is grinding to a halt because like a boat got caught in the Suez Canal. Like
Wild.
we have literally invented air travel. But it turns out that a lot of shipping is going on that I didn't know how
Right?
much of the shipping was shipping.
We've
I thought
invented space
shipping was a
travel.
vague term that we were using to talk about air travel. We're not. We're talking about ships. Also, side note, are boats just too big? This boat is too big. If 13 tugboats cannot untug you from the Suez Canal, your boat is too big.
Yeah.
I'm worried that our eyes were bigger than our stomachs when it came to boat size. Just,
Oh, yeah. No, I think you're right.
it's,
Hmm.
I mean, what a
Interesting.
time. In any case, be safe out there. A, because depending on where you live, toilet paper might be running out again soon. B, because COVID rates are on the rise everywhere. C, because, you should just, it just never hurts to be careful.
Right. Yeah.
For all of the above reasons.
Yeah.
If your state has decided to fully open up, maybe use your own judgment about whether you should be engaging in the activities that they have sanctioned.
I know. I saw some tweet or something that like somebody, either Greg Abbott or somebody from Texas, had shared that they were like, day 17 since we fully reopened and case counts are still going down. And like, maybe that's true. I'm curious if they also like stopped all statewide testing as soon as they
Right.
reopened the entire state. Like I feel
I
like
would suspect yes.
anytime that a state that has fully reopened is telling you that their numbers are great, I'm going to need you to do like one additional Google search
That's right.
to really get to the bottom of that, because I don't trust it.
I don't think it's possible that you can fully reopen and not have some kind of spike, even if some of your population is vaccinated, because the rest of your population is still out there just spreading COVID.
That's right. That's exactly
near and far.
Mask free.
Mask free roaming.
Yeah.
Also, just wear a mask just in case. I mean,
guys,
it's so easy. It just doesn't.
I've been doing it for a year. It's like just
it doesn't. You don't even feel it anymore. It's annoying in the same way that, listen, wearing a bra is annoying, but women have been doing that every day for decades, and that's just been life. But, like, if women can wear bras, you can wear masks. And that's the news this week. We'll be back next week with. It's been so exciting to not have Donald Trump in the news, because it's like, remember how just a few months ago every single week was the most insane week we had ever heard of?
I know.
And now we're just like out there. The news just feels like the news is. We can finally
about boats stuck in the Suez
Canal.
About
boats. I think soon we'll be able to bring back sinkhole radio, because
I think so too. Spring's
coming. There's going to be sinkholes, you guys. That's a very sinkhole forward time of year because of all the rain. So, get ready for that. But if we can get this boat out of the Suez Canal, we can move on with and some fun animal stories. Remember when we talked about tree snakes? I mean,
tree snakes. Who is having the rat?
Australia. Australia. Obviously, it's Australia.
Having some sort of like massive rat infestation, just like thousands of rats like going around attacking everyone. I don't know if they're attacking.
There's another meme on TikTok that's just people talking about their toilet spider in Australia. And it's just people showing you the world's most horrifying spiders, and that's just the one that lives by their toilet.
Yeah.
Don't go to Australia. Just be safe.
Australia remains terrible. That we can confirm.
Yeah.
We won't tell you that every week, but just know that we know.
Just right. We're never going to forget. That's a hashtag never forget kind of moment. That's the news.
Bye.
We'll talk to you next week. Bye.